to the Current Conversations podcast, a production of Gloucester County's Community Engagement and Public Information Department. I'm Savannah, and this month we're going to talk about some zoning ideas that have to do with our waterways. And we're also going to talk about a potential new technology district. These are both things we're looking for public input about, so this is a good podcast to get you acquainted with the ideas so you can then contact us and share your input. So let me start first by introducing our experts today, Ann Ducey-Ortiz and Lauren Ruschetta. Ann is the director of Gloucester County's Planning, Zoning, and Environmental Programs Department, and Lauren is a research assistant who's partnering with us through a working waterfront internship. Ladies, let's start with a little bit about your job and background, and we'll throw in one non-work related fun fact about yourself. Who wants to go first?
I'll just go first just to.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm been with the county for 25 years. I started out as a planner, and then I was an interim planning director in 2008, and then I got zoning, and then I got environmental programs. So through that time, I've worked on multiple projects, and the Working Waterfronts actually started in 2008. And so this has been a project that I've been hoping to do for all those years. And I'm very excited that Lauren was able to help us with it with the National Working Waterfronts network. Fun fact about me that actually most everyone knows now, but I played ice hockey at Cornell University when I was there a long time ago.
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
That's usually my fun fact that I share with people, but now most people know about it. So,
well, we're going to hope there's some strangers listening to the podcast who didn't know that.
That is so cool, Anne. I love that. So yeah, I'm Lauren. I'm super excited to be with y'all today. I'm in my last semester at the University of Delaware studying marine policy, where I am a research assistant, and my research really focuses on community-led participatory methods research focused on the energy transition. I use surveys and interviews to really support recommendations for policy that is informed straight from the community. And at the National Working Waterfront Internship for Planning and Policy, I've been working with folks at the planning department, mostly Anne and Sean, supporting them in really reaching out to every kind of person in the community to see their perspectives on what's working, what's not working, and how they sort of envision a resilient future for the working waterfront in the county. And yeah, it's been really fun so far. I've been interviewing folks. We have a survey that just went live. So yeah, trying to reach as many people as possible so that they can inform some recommendations and guidelines for a zoning overlay. My fun fact is that every summer for the last 5 years, I have kayaked the entire length of the Schuylkill River in Pennsylvania, which is about 127 miles of river.
Goodness.
Over the span of 6 days.
Wow. No, that's a huge commitment, though.
It is.
So when we're talking about waterfronts and people engaging with waterfronts, you're very much and personally in that arena.
Oh yeah, I love any kind of water. I'm in.
Let's start from the beginning. And can you give me the background of why Gloucester is even thinking about creating a working waterfront overlay district, and maybe explain what an overlay district is, just for people who don't live planning and zoning?
Sure. So this started out actually a long time ago when the Bacos owned York River Yacht Haven, and they started doing oystering in front of their facility. And if you're familiar with that, it's on the York River, and it's a pretty residential area. And it started with a lot of the neighbors like, what are you doing out there in the water? And so this was happening all over Gloucester, but in general in Virginia. And so the Middle Peninsula Planning District put together a committee to look at these use conflicts between working waterfronts and residential. And as kind of a step back, historically we've been a agricultural and aquacultural based community, but then in the 80s we became more residential. And I think when they adopted zoning, they kind of forgot about our agricultural background. They were so focused on residential development. So a lot of our zoning doesn't really accommodate some of these uses, especially the historical working waterfronts. Most of them require some type of special exception or a special way of getting approval for them. So over the years, based on that study, there was a report done, and the board adopted the report. And since that time, we've been actually trying to work on some of these issues. So we included working waterfronts in our comp plan, that we want to support them and allow them to grow. And one of the ideas is to write an ordinance. The idea for an overlay district is just an idea. Lauren might come up with a different recommendation, but an overlay district is on top of the existing zoning, so it might allow additional uses, but the current uses are permitted. So we have two overlay districts now. We have a highway corridor overlay district, so that runs mostly along our commercial corridor on Route 17. And that has additional requirements for landscaping setbacks above and beyond the existing zoning. And then our historical overlay, which is on our historic properties in the county. So the underlying zoning typically is residential, but then if you do anything in those districts, you have to go to the historical committee for review for certain things in those districts. So it is on top of the existing zoning. So Lauren may decide to recommend that, or it might be just to change the zoning, or it might be to just allow additional uses in existing zoning. So she's been talking to a lot of people and getting great ideas. So we'll see what happens.
Okay, so usually an overlay district kind of adds more rules to an existing zone, but this would be adding more uses.
That's correct.
So we're not sure it'll be an overlay district yet. That's something being considered. You mentioned this, but I kind of wanted to pull it out because I thought it was interesting. You said this goes back to the 2008 York River User Conflict Committee report and recommendations. What was that document? What did it say? What did it mean?
It was kind of the start of this, and since then there's been several other studies. Again, the Middle Peninsula Planning District really has taken the lead. They're our local planning district, and they deal with all these issues throughout the Middle Peninsula. But so that study had it was a committee made of working watermen. So like several of them, I've given the context to Lauren, like John Bigliotti was on that from our Project Seafood. We had a lawyer whose mom, or I think he lived along the Ware River, and he didn't like some of the conflict issues. We had a sailor, we had Tommy Leggett from Chesapeake Seafood. So I can't remember all the people. We had a board member, and we had me from the planning department, and we had a facilitator. She used to be a planner with the PDC, and she's now the economic development director at in Williamsburg. But so it was really great because a lot of these planning committees, and this is kind of also my planning love of planning, is that you get a group of people together that disagree and they can't, they just totally disagree about things. And then through discussions and facilitations come together to kind of come up with recommendations. So one of the big things about this, and Lauren might talk about this, the idea of zoning over the water on VMRC, the Virginia Marine Resource Commission, they regulate uses on the water, and Gloucester, we regulate uses on the land. And this is the issue of the conflict, because in the water, oystering, fishing, recreational, vehicles, just being out on the water, that's regulated by VMRC. And so the conflict between that and the land is kind of the issue. And what do we allow on land? And one of the things that came out was to actually include the borders of the county in our planning efforts, but to leave VMRC to do the regulation of the water, and the county would just stick to zoning on the land. We do go off the land, like for building permits for, like, if you have electrical on a pier or something, but that's, kind of related to the land. So other recommendations, which we did not do, was the dark sky initiative. So that's something that several people brought up in our community. The board has chosen to not do the dark sky initiative, but that was like to limit the amount of lighting and things. The other big one is no net loss of waterfront. So that's kind of the purpose of this ordinance, would be to look at our existing working waterfronts and to either promote them or allow them to expand. So the idea is that we were losing a lot of working waterfronts from watermen dying, really, sadly, and then they leave their land and nobody wants to take it up, and then they lose their non-conforming status. So those are the kind of the bigger recommendations. There are 7 recommendations overall, which I could give you if I had my report, but those are the big ones. And the big one was to create to do an ordinance to allow them to continue. So we put it in our comp plan. We just never got around to this next step.
Well, I'm glad we're here. No time like a present, right? And I think we'll kind of transition that way. I saw in your papers that you were given a grant to bring on a researcher earlier this year, and that's how we got partnered with Lauren. We're gonna probably make her blush, but since you'll be more comfortable bragging on her than she will on herself, can you tell me why or how you chose her out of the stack of applications? Because I'm sure plenty of people applied for this internship.
Yeah, I have to say again, working for the county, we were totally impressed. We had, like, I think 17 or maybe 19 applicants, and they were all incredible. The quality of the resume, the cover letter, the recommendations. Lauren stood out mainly with her background. first of all, she had some regulatory with the the wind generation and doing the work with the citizens, like, outreach. And that's something we really wanted because we wanted the outreach end of things. And then with the regulatory background and kind of having a general understanding of planning, she's going to actually learn more about planning in her future career, but having kind of a general understanding, a lot of the people that we looked at were more research. And Laura does research, but it was more related to the organisms in the water and that kind of thing. And this was more people focused, which is what we wanted. So,
Yeah, I think that's fabulous. Lauren, I'm going to pull you in here. What's the
Sure.
scope of this internship? What have you been working on? What's it like?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for that, Anne. So I really started by doing a ton of just like desktop research and reading everything I can specifically about the Gloucester County. Anne was awesome, and she provided me like a whole folder of background material about just the history of all of this stuff and the decisions that have been made so far, and also like email chains for ideas and things like that. So that was awesome, and also just really relying on the National Working Waterfront Network as a resource as well. They have case studies, they have a ton of like videos and just really specific resources for other places that struggle with this as well, because Gloucester County is unique and it's also similar to other places that also have working waterfronts and use conflicts and other vulnerabilities that face them. And so it started with that. And then with the support from folks from the planning department, I also was given a list of potential contacts to reach out to for interviews. And so I've been speaking with a lot of different kinds of people. I've been speaking with watermen, I've been speaking with businessmen, I've been speaking with academics, I've been speaking with folks that own property on the waterfront, and I've been speaking with other kinds of regional planners, really all about these questions around like, first of all, how do you define a working waterfront? Because something we are really curious about is, do we need to be a bit more flexible about the kinds of activities that we envision happening on the working waterfront in the future and the present? And so kind of making that definition, also how they define sort of quote unquote the problem around, is it based in these use conflicts that, folks are struggling with the actual sort of nature of the working waterfront and what they expect to be sort of surrounded by when they live there. And also, just what they envision for sort of a healthy, resilient future in terms of economic development and in the region. And really, if I was to pick a couple of like themes for my conversations to share, um, this sort of cultural historical identity comes up a lot, where folks are like, we don't want to lose this part of us. This is a deeply important aspect of who this place is and what we believe in and who we are. And so I think if I were to say that like there's one thing that everyone that I speak to has in common, it's that recognition that this is really important and the space is really important, and we have to like get this right to make sure that we can balance all of these different needs.
Yeah, no
And so that's
pressure.
right. And yeah, and also just acknowledging that the current situation, I guess, is it's tenuous. Anne mentioned that it's an aging working waterfront in terms of the people that are using it, the watermen and the different kinds of business owners. And that complicates things. And so a lot of people talk about trying to incentivize new types of people to come and support the working waterfront and trying to build out flexible ways to make sure that can happen. And so that's really one of the things that I'm focusing on in terms of my recommendations is trying to find creative ways to be flexible while also providing structure. So that way, these sort of non-conforming use issues stop happening, where folks can really have the space and the time and the support to be able to develop new ideas and new projects on the waterfront. So
So to
yeah,
bring it down to like a more concrete, and I'm not saying that we're going to get every example here, but what
sure.
are some examples of ways people would use a working waterfront, quote unquote?
one of the things I asked Lauren to do is like, we can't think of everything, but like traditionally it's marinas, right? And then
Mhm.
the big thing in Gloucester right now is oystering. So oystering's made a big comeback, and so and then there's the general like fishing, crabbing, fish, just fishing, commercial fishing. So those are the big ones, but talking about bringing younger people, the Harrises have started Matheson Seafood, and they're a young couple that are started an oyster business down at the old Shackelford seafood site, and they have ideas for like ecotourism, that kind of thing. So like there are new uses. So I told Lauren when she's talking to people, that's one thing with zoning, you can't think of everything. And so someone always comes up with this great idea and it's like, oh, dang, it's not permitted in our ordinance. So Lauren, I don't know if you've heard of any, new ideas that I didn't bring up.
I have heard pretty much all of those ideas, really trying to expand it to include things like ecotourism, even like agrotourism, where people are interested in coming to these businesses for these experiences in terms of, just like that unique sort of opportunities to engage with something that they haven't before. And so yeah, and I think too, something else that has been coming up that when you think of folks that operate and rely on the working waterfront, sometimes their activities, aren't taking place right on the water. It might be a couple miles away, whether it's because, they need a
Like a bait and
refrigerator.
tackle shop kind of thing.
Yeah, and so that's also something that I'm really trying to consider that, I'm saying working waterfront, but sometimes those water dependent businesses and water dependent people really aren't right on the water. And so how can we plan for that flexibility in a way that really meets people where they are and where they want to be? So
Another thing that came up recently, and Lauren talked to the property owner. Someone had a marina, but then they wanted to have a business as part of that too, that would allow manufacturing of, I forget what they're called, but it's for shoreline restoration. And so that was under manufacturing. So I'm like, well, you're a marina, you're a non-conforming marina, that's a different use. That doesn't come under your use. And it was not allowed in a residential district. So those kind of uses, Lawrence talked to a couple of marine contractors, and they you know, again, trying to have that compatibility with residential, because our waterfront is also our highest tax base. That's where we have all the beautiful homes, and you want to preserve that beauty, but then also accommodate these traditional uses, and then maybe new uses that are like a living shoreline is now the recommended improvement to prevent erosion along the shore. So these marine contractors, are important and they need access to the water, but where does the manufacturing fit in?
Yeah. So I took your survey because I was interested, and I was
oh,
learning things as I was taking it because I didn't really have a definition of working waterfront. I was like, you mean a marina? And one of the things that jumped out to me that I was not thinking about and made sense though was you mentioned like kayak launches, kayak rental places, more of this fun sort of waterfront. You don't have to be fishing, you can just be enjoying the water as a business. And I was like, oh, I never thought about that. So why is getting public input such a big deal for this potential new ordinance?
What planning's all about, in my opinion. So, and I guess like Lauren's doing the work that we would want to do. Like we could write an ordinance, I could copy somebody's ordinance or write stuff that I know about. But over the years, I like, have talked to all these different people, or like, the marine contractor that I'm like, sorry, you're not allowed to go here because it's not permitted. So, she's doing all the background work, and her internship goes to June, and we'll probably end up bringing it to the planning commission, having the public hearings, we'll have to see how it all works out. But, there'll be even more public comment and public input, but we very rarely have the opportunity to do what Lauren's doing, like just really talking to people, getting their input. And again, the people that work in the water, they know what they need. That's one of the phrases is, planner is a jack of all trades, master of none. And so, you just know enough about everything. And, sometimes you can get yourself into trouble knowing enough about everything and then making a decision that's screws everything up. So that, again, it's just a luxury to have someone like Lauren being able to do this work. I mean, ideally, it's what we'd like to do with everything, but very rarely does it happen. So.
well, and you're planning for people at the end of the day. And my perspective too, like other things, you can either do that community engagement up front or you can not. And either way, you're going to end up talking to those people and they might be in a very different mood
Yeah.
if you don't do that upfront work and get their input, because it's just a question of fairness too. Like these are folks that are going to be directly impacted by decisions that we make, and so they deserve to have an input and to be heard about their questions and their concerns and what they envision.
And I'm going to include the link to this survey in our description for the podcast and any, social media posts we make about it. It's not like a easy URL to say, so you're just gonna have to look for the link. But what are some other ways people could give you input if maybe they're not so technologically savvy?
Well, Lauren had brought up the idea of trying to have, paper copies like at the library and that kind of thing. And again, we're so lucky to have Lauren, but she's remote, and we don't really just have, like, we're actually down 2 people right now, so we don't have the staff. But I would say that if people want to call our office, we could try to have someone on staff work with them to fill out the survey. So that we did that years ago when we did our Gloucester Point Hayes Village plan. We sent out postcards, and a lot of people that didn't really use computers or weren't computer savvy would call up, and we would work with them to fill out the survey. So that's an idea. I think that nowadays, even us old people are pretty good with the phone. so
Yeah.
hoping
It makes me think of my grandpa. He's
Yeah.
80 something. He's always lived on the water. He cares about this deeply, and he is not going to find a link. So, Bruce, if
Yeah.
you're listening, this is for you. The phone number is 804-693-1224.
or as a good granddaughter, you can go over and help them take this.
Yeah, I probably will.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you guys wanted to say before I transition? Because I'm going to go to the Technology Overlay District next.
I just wanted to add that it's great having kind of, I don't want to say an outsider, but Lauren is bringing a new perspective. Like, I'm definitely too close to it. I am passionate about it. I love it. And she's, kind of heard a lot of my stories and everything, but she can come out, she can come in with an outside look. And then, and I think we've been enjoying sharing some of the, oh, you can't do that because of this, so the challenges of planning, and, planning is a part of the police power. So we're limited to what the Constitution allows us to do, and what state code allows us to do. So those challenges are just things that we'll have to work through. But it's really just been great having somebody with an open mind, talking to people and coming up with ideas. So really appreciate that.
Thank you, Lauren.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to pivot here a bit, but I know this is not the only overlay district Gloucester is considering. Anne, could you tell me about the potential technology overlay district that would be created up in the Glens area if it has enough support?
Okay, so this is an idea that's brand new. So unlike the project that Lauren's working on that's been around for a while, this is a new idea. Data centers, Virginia is the largest area for data centers in the country, and actually I think in the world. And data centers require a lot of energy, and they're needed for all this new technology like AI and all that. Again, I'm one of those things, jack of all trades, masters of none. We're learning a lot about data centers, but they're also really good for the economy. You can they generate a lot of revenue for a locality. Our administration has kind of looked at the different, I guess in general in the region, we've been looking at this as an opportunity to create economic development in the county. Unfortunately, the only place that right now would support a data center with the power lines would be up in the Glens area. And in our comp plan, that is our rural area. That's the area we're looking to preserve as a rural place. And a data center is a pretty industrial looking building, so, but you can put buffers, there's things that you can do to minimize the impacts. And the technology has gotten better in terms of the noise and, water usage and those kind of things. But similar to this work that Lauren's doing, instead of, writing an ordinance or ideas to go and meet the community, kind of like we did with this study for the working waterfronts, but go out and do a, learn about data centers presentation. So we're on May 28th, which is a Wednesday night. It's 6:30 at RCC. We're having a little forum. We have 3 people on a panel to talk about data centers, talk about the benefits to Gloucester, talk about, the idea, and try to get a sense of whether this is something that people would like us to move forward with. So, before we spend the work that Lauren's doing now, on this, like, is this something we would want to consider? Because it is a little different than what our comp plan calls about for the northern end of our county.
I saw that
So
was going to be a town hall, but you're saying it's also going to be, you know, there's a presentation element, an education, come learn about it, and then share your thoughts kind of aspect to this.
exactly. So we'll have the county administrator. We have Joe Lurch from the Virginia Association of Counties, and he's done a lot of work throughout the state with data centers. So he's very helpful. And I think we're going to have one more person. I don't think we've identified that person yet, but maybe a administrator from another locality that has a data center in them. So we've been, researching kind of what Lauren's been doing with working waterfronts. We've been learning all about data centers, pros and cons, and but it is a big different use for the northern end of the county. And we kind of went through this with solar facilities, are they good? Are they bad? Do we want them? Do we not want them? And so we thought we'd just try to get up front before the planning commission starts looking further at it. So
Yeah, and just as a reminder, what are the steps for any new overlay district or new ordinance that's going to be formalized in Gloucester's code? What are the steps?
good point. Yes. So nothing is in a vacuum. So we have our planning commission, which is advisory to the board of supervisors. So there's a public hearing before the planning commission. Typically, the planning commission will talk about it. So they've already talked a little about data centers. They're looking forward to Lauren's report about the working waterfronts, and then staff would come up with a proposed ordinance, and then we would bring it to public hearing at the planning commission. Then based on the comments of the planning commission, we would then, the planning commission would send a recommendation to the board of supervisors, and the board of supervisors would also have a public hearing. It's typically advertised in the legal section of the local paper, but we do try to get the word out, especially when we're doing code amendments. Sometimes we're required to send notification to all the adjoining property owners. So if we were creating an overlay district, we probably would have to send all the adjoining property owners notification that we were changing the zoning on the properties that are being affected. So, so, and I will say, based on our zoning ordinance update, the letter seems to work the best. The notice in the paper, people don't come out, but when people get a letter, then they come out, which we want. We want people to come out because we want to know what people think.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So, y'all, there is time to get involved. We want to hear your thoughts. There are new ideas coming, but we can only do it if we all agree on what's best or we compromise to say this is probably best.
One of our planning commissioners says when neither side is happy, then it's a good ordinance. So I don't know if that's always true, but usually there's a compromise, as you said. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, ladies, thank you so much for coming on today. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you kind of demystifying the process for us. I can't wait to see your recommendations, Lauren. I will put the link to the survey in our show description. Please share it. Please get other people to weigh in on it, because even if you're just, someone who lives in the middle of Gloucester like me and you don't own a water-based business, you still interact with the water if you live in Gloucester. We want to hear from you. So
That's a
thank
really
you.
good point, because, some of the concerns are people that access the water, and all of a sudden there's a bunch of oyster cages in the middle of they're never in the middle of the channel, but, especially for kayaking and stuff. So yes, even if you don't live on the water, please take the survey, because like you said, we all enjoy living here in Gloucester and having access to the water, and it affects everyone. So, even if you eat seafood.
Which hopefully you do. It's delicious.
Mm.
Thank you, ladies, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Oh.